Now He's Out in Public and Everyone Can See is an 18-channel video installation that weaves together hundreds of fragments of found online video diaries in which people are recounting a series of recent and highly circulated media scandals involving African American men. I work out of a documentary tradition. I don't go out and photograph people on the streets. Instead, I am looking at people representing themselves. And that's how I got to online video diaries.
Now, what a person does in their own personal life, that's their business. But
he messed up when he walked out that door. Now
the metamorphosis started happening, right?
If he wasn't never black before,
he's changing colors.
The motherfucker is black as hell right now.
the blackness is coming out of him now.
You found out your ass was black.
You just black now. I mean, you got beat down. All black when it comes to them.
You black now, goddamn it.
No longer in the four walls of his home,
behind closed doors,
but out in public view,
in a public place.
Now he's out in public
for everyone to see.
People were giving me access to their homes all around the country, all around the world, really. This was a way that I could actually reach far beyond the streets that I had access to. At first I thought it was gonna be about one media scandal, and then I realized that it wasn't about that at all. It was about how it kept slipping, about the slip, that it was never, in the end, about the man in question. It was always about something else, and I wanted to get at that something else. That was what I was interested in. What was that something else that kept being referred to when they thought that they were talking about the news, when they thought they were talking about a celebrity?
You draw attention to yourself, black man, when you go live in an all-white neighborhood, black man.
Yeah. Contradiction in terms.
Is he eligible?
Black man in a White House.
My White House.
The police gonna watch you,
because they ain't forgetting about the hood in you.
and people gonna watch you too.
Your skin's way too dark to be living in the place that's good.
And all these bloggers typing until their fingers get sore.
I'm watching you.
So this is what he was probably thinking.
They would be talking about this one celebrity and this media story, and they would slip, and all of a sudden it would be about someone else. Another media celebrity, also African-American man, because this was a media scandal that was sort of deeply implicated in sort of conversations about and conflicts about race, where blackness itself becomes the scandal.
Because he is.
Because
he's black. There, I said it.
We project our desires, our fantasies, and our anxieties about ourselves and our power or our lack of power in society on public figures, when those public figures are of color or not what we consider normative in our society right now. There's a lot that surfaces. What I hope to have surface in the narrative is that it's not about these men at all, but it's about our struggle over identity and what identity is, how identity is produced through the gaze and through language.
What, you think he's better than me or you?
And like he's just better.
You know, we all know the type.
he's my type.
Middle class.
He was the trendsetter, man.
Nice suits, nice cars.
Hey, the past years, this guy would have been serving me coffee.
So I wanted to kind of trace that slippage, because I think that that slippage reveals something about the way that identity is constructed and disseminated, and that it's something that we are now as a society struggling very deeply over, and that it's not at all resolved, and it's, you know, sort of lives are lost over it.
I really can't think of too many of our black famous people who have not gotten caught up in some type of scandal or conspiracy.
I would really hate to see any type of assassination attempt,
some type of,
any type of
violent act
against
or
this guy.
something.
Who's gonna kill the black man?
It is a provocative show, and I want it to be that, because I think that we need to be provoked to talk about things that we're uncomfortable talking about. Although I was concerned and I had question about how I could do this as a person who's not living that experience directly, because I'm not a person of color, I also thought that as a member of society, right, and a member of society that has a black president, through which a lot of these struggles are now enacted on, that I couldn't not do this project.
We didn't get to have a childhood, and humans make mistakes.
They make mistakes.
He's just a normal dude.
Nobody's perfect.
They have sin
So why in the heck should we judge him?
in their lives.
He's a person like everybody else.
What makes him exempt from being human?
Then that brings me to the other thing.
The expressions that people are producing, the vlogs, the video diaries, that's only one manifestation of so many different ways that people are trying to make their voice heard in public today, right? There's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's YouTube. Although they're called social, like these networks are called social networks. It's about my Facebook, my friends, right? My Twitter feed, my position. I'm taking people who are isolated, who are alone, who are speaking. I mean, I don't know if they're isolated, but they're speaking in isolation and they're speaking alone at home to themselves, to a camera, to an imagined community. And there's something very perplexing and heartbreaking to me about that, because it speaks to people's isolation and also their desire for connection. So they may be saying the most loathsome things, or they may be saying the most insightful things, but they're still speaking to themselves. And that is sort of the form that's produced and reproduced online. Like, for example, in YouTube, you have a single isolated speaker in a frame, and the only way that one can respond to them is to make another single isolated video or to make and post an anonymous comment, and we know how far and how deep those conversations can go in that venue, which is that it's very limited. People have something that they want to say, and they want to say it publicly, but there's not really a platform. We don't have a platform to speak about these issues that we care about, or to speak to each other. There's a tension, right, between the isolation that people and the so-called privacy that people think that they need and want and insist on, and this need and desire to be public, to have a public platform, to have a place to speak. And so I think that that's the tension that I try to create in this space, the tension between this intense isolation that we're all living through and in, and the desire for sociality. As we shift from the analog to the digital, images become more polished, they become more sterile. We can delete the mistakes, we can delete the evidence and the traces of our humanity. In these DIY videos, there's still traces of the human. There's a tension between this very human and very intimate and flawed, passionate speaker, right? And then how we perform the scripts of mass media and how we take those scripts from mass media and kind of negotiate them and filter them through our own subjectivity, through our own bodies. So people are kind of speaking the scripts of mass media, word for word sometimes, but they're standing in their bedroom in front of an unmade bed, or like a newscaster with a microphone at a desk, and then behind is a nail on the wall where there should have been a picture. And I love those traces because it's like these traces of humanness. There's something that you don't see in, sort of the sterile, slick, polished mass media scripts that we see all the time. This show came out of previous body of work in which I was making videos that had multiple channels, but they were all within the same flat composition.
So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my medications.
I'm on Depakote 500 milligrams. I'm on Seroquel 50 milligrams once before bedtime.
I'm taking
Risperdal, Celexa, 40 milligrams of Prozac, and half a milligram of Xanax at night.
In one of the installations that I produced in 2009 at LACMA, which I would say was probably the first, sort of the first part of this project, it was called Testament. And like this show now, I was also using video diaries and grouping them together around single subjects, producing a kind of constructed conversation out of these disparate, isolated voices, and making links and locating tropes and producing courses sort of at these intersections where certain words or certain phrases or certain feelings are shared. So I'm kind of revealing something that exists already, which is that people do come together at certain moments or certain words or certain ideas, but they don't necessarily, that's not the emphasis. The emphasis is my individual expression. Here I am saying what I believe, and it's about me speaking to you. And when I'm saying no, it's about us speaking to each other.
So today,
I
entered a new phase
sucked
in my life.
I went into work,
Like any other day,
and my clock-in card is missing.
And so my manager comes up to me.
One of our directors called me into an office.
My bosses
Called me at the office and said, I want to talk to you.
and
I wasn't sure what was going on, but I went down and basically one of the larger people in the company and someone from human resources was there.
And next thing you know, the hiring manager walked in
and he started off with, "Well, this is a part of the job I really don't like." And I'm like, "Jesse, you don't need to go any further.
what's going on?
You tell me
And I was
I'm
like,
unemployed."
You fire me?
Fired, aren't I?
No.
He says, "Yes, we're gonna.
And they were
The
like,
route's not making enough money."
we're
I
really
said, "No. When
sorry.
does it
You're a
start?"
really great worker, but unfortunately,
Unfortunately, the business is not where it is.
The guys have been sitting around the
I
shop
would just sit around
in large numbers.
begging people that were walking by to come over, and then the owner cut everybody's hours down to like nothing.
And myself and a lot of other people,
my center and the other center,
I think a good 1,000 or so people.
My entire department was
600
officially
people were
laid off.
In Testament. I had 4 projections around this large room that people had to navigate through. People in groups would stand together, watch that projection. When it was done, they would shift as a cluster to the next projection. There was almost this merging that took place between the social clusters of people in the space and the sociality that I was producing through clustering people together in patterns and as collectives on screens. The show for Lace, Now He's Out in Public and Everyone Can See, takes this further, much further, in that there are 18 monitors that appear to be floating around the space surrounding the viewer. In a way, I explode those videos out into 3-dimensional space, creating a kind of physical manifestation or a materialization of the internet. The position of the viewer continuously shifts. As you navigate through the space, you create montage as you move from one monitor to another. If you move in a different direction, you create a different set of relationships between the speakers. In the recounting and the retelling of these very well-known media scandals, the men in question are never mentioned.
I don't know what race you are.
No one knows the first thing about him.
Even his name is a mystery.
You gotta show your ID.
And so you can never master the narrative. You can never get the whole picture. You can never get the whole story, right? It's always a partial view.
Do we know who this man is?
I don't know who that motherfucker is.
Nah. Do we know what he does?
What's he got to hide? What is he trying to hide?
Break it down, bro. Yo, don't lie to me, boy.
The viewer becomes the protagonist, or a kind of a detective who is placed in the center of the story, trying to piece together and to identify the stories and also the men in question. For me, it was also like a question of how could I represent this in a way that's not just about black and white, right? That's not just about, that doesn't perpetuate the polarization that the mainstream media perpetuates and that the stories, these scandals, seem to perpetuate. You know, sort of clusters of people that identify with one community or another. And so my goal was not to necessarily only show the racism that we are still struggling with so acutely in our society right now that seems to have come to a head. I don't know, I mean, that I hope at some point after that head, you know, there's going to be a way that it is able to resolve itself, but I think it only can resolve itself through dialogue and through conversation. And what I'm hoping to do in this show is to produce more conversation.
Let me pause here for a second and say
I'm not racist at all.
whatsoever. I am not. And
I have nothing against black people.
I'm not meaning to be racist at all.
I'm totally not racist. I value black friends. I have many all races, Hispanic friends. I have many white friends. I have many Jewish friends. Like
don't think I'm a racist at all.
I grew up and had many good friends that were black.
I mean, I grew up surrounded by black people.
I have no problem that he's African American.
I could care less about the color of his skin.
I don't mind the fact that he's black at all. I love black people. I think they're really cool. But
there are a lot of racial things in this whole situation.
What my installation and what my work in general in the past years has been sort of working against is that emphasis on the individual and saying, no, actually, let's think about this in terms of the collective. What is the relationship of the collective to the individual? How are these voices collective? How can we imagine a more social society, a society where people are out in public and everyone can see?